German Chancellor Angela Merkel, also Time magazine's recently announced Person of the Year, received a 9-minute standing ovation after a speech in which she argued that helping refugees is, and I quote, no more or less than a moral imperative. At the same time, Merkel indicated that the 1 million refugees expected to reach Germany had to be markedly reduced, and that if we do this properly, the advantages will be much greater than the risks. Chancellor Merkel makes these statements as the worries of many European countries continue to grow, and rightly so, given the fact that hundreds of refugees going into Norway were recently caught with images of ISIS flags and severed heads on their phones. Joining me now with the legal stance on the refugee crisis is criminal defense attorney from Ozols Law Firm, Alex Ozols. Alex, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Let's start with the refugee crisis as a whole. This is the crux of the entire debate, essentially, but I want you to weigh in as well. In your opinion, does allowing refugees into Europe or into America without a proper vetting process pose security risks to these nations?
Without a proper vetting risk, yes, absolutely, it would pose risks to these nations. However, in the U.S., there is a very strict and a very long vetting process.
Okay, let's dig in here with your legal knowledge to this vetting process. Can you tell us about the step-by-step process that goes into the background checks before people, particularly refugees, are allowed into our nation?
Absolutely. So it starts with an application to the UN, and the UN gives some of those applications to basically an assistance center in the U.S. The assistance center, what they do is they're federally funded by the U.S. government, and they work with the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, they work with the National Counterterrorism Center, and they work to use biographical data and fingerprinting data to go through these applications. Now, if they get past that step, the next step is meeting with a DHS agent. The DHS agent is trained in counterterrorism, and they make a decision whether or not this individual would be admitted into this country. Now, for Syrians, there's actually a Syrian enhanced review process where it goes one more step. It's a 2 to 3 year process, quite a long process, and since 2011, 750,000 refugees have came in, and not one of them so far has been charged or arrested for terrorism.
All right, now that process, is that just for refugees coming to our nation, or is that a similar process to visa applications, such as the one that Tashfeen Malik passed when she came into the country on a fiancé visa?
That's a completely different process. So the refugee process goes through the UN and then goes through other channels in the U.S. government. The visa process goes through U.S. immigration. It's a similar process. One applies for a K-1 visa. They're likely approved. When they come to the U.S., they have to get married within 90 days. They usually have to go through an interview as well, but that interview is more focused on whether or not this couple has a legitimate marriage and whether or not they're in love. That interview doesn't necessarily go directly into terrorism or the backgrounds of these individuals.
Now, is that interview mandatory in the case of the K-1 visa applications? Because I know there were reports, and these aren't necessarily confirmed, but there were reports that we're unsure of whether Tashfeen Malik actually had that in-person interview before she came to the country.
The interview is a mandatory process. It happens, it should happen in every single case. There is a possibility that in certain circumstances that something fell through the cracks and that she got her visa or she got her green card or she got her temporary visa, but the interview is supposed to be a mandatory process on a K-1 visa.
Now, there are some reports that are saying that immigration officials are not allowed to look at the social media posts of individuals, of foreign individuals who are applying for visas. Now, this doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, these people aren't even U.S. citizens yet, and social media is a great way to find out what people's background are. What's your reaction to this report?
I actually have to agree with that. I mean, I feel that these agents should be able to use every resource they can. When a refugee comes in, they can use the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, National Counterterrorism Center. I think they should be able to use social media. If they can find something on social media, then they should be able to use that, and they should be able to question that individual in the interview.
Now, do you expect the Obama administration to change that rule or regulation standard, whatever you want to call it? Do you expect them to change that now that it's become evident that it could have prevented these San Bernardino attacks had we been able to look at the social media posts of one of the terrorists and prevent her from coming here in the first place?
They may change that policy, but you got to think there's so many channels here. That's DHS agents looking into social media.